Hey, good morning, Keith. How are you?
Good morning, Brandon. I am doing great. Much better than I deserve.
So, I thought this morning we could talk about money. Money is a topic that impacts every single one of us in America and throughout the world, and often serves as, in many ways, a blessing. In some ways, a curse. There's all these things related to it. But because money is such a gigantic topic, there's so many different ways to go about it. What say you about a proper perspective for us to take this morning?
Yeah, well, and I think you just used the key word is perspective. I think anytime you begin to talk about money, you have to begin with the perspective on it, how you view it. And as you know, I do these money management seminars in different places, and that's actually where we begin. First point of the first session is about perspective. Perspective on the source of our money, perspective on the permanency of money, perspective on the different aspects of money. But I think the key word is perspective. How do we view it? How do we see it? Is it a means to an end? Is it an end of itself? Perspective is really the key.
Yeah, and so one of the things that I think a lot of us struggle with is just how to view our money. You know, what perspective am I going to take for it? Is it for my own gratification? Is everything that God blesses me with just so that I can live a life of the most comfort, of the most pleasurable experiences, et cetera, et cetera? You know, and so the question is it that, or is it possibly something else?
Yeah. Well, I think there's one verse in the Bible that is when it comes to our perspective on our money and the things that our money can do. I think there's one verse that is a game changer. It's Proverbs 3 and verse 9, where he says, "Honor the Lord with your possessions." Now, there are a lot of folks who are really okay with honoring the Lord with their singing, with maybe even their service, their church attendance. But when it comes to their possessions, that is where sometimes it becomes a real struggle. But Solomon, who, by the way, knew something about funds, right? I mean, he knew something about resources. So here you have this really wealthy, financially successful man who's also inspired by the Holy Spirit. And he says, honor the Lord with your possessions. And if we really live by that, I mean, that really is a game changer. That will change the entire perspective that we have on our money and our resources.
Yeah, but what a challenge that is, right? What a challenge it is to think my home, my car, my income is first and foremost to be used in ways to honor God and not to make sure that I look really good to my neighbors, right?
That's our first move, isn't it? We come by selfishness naturally, and we like to think, and this is another place where we have to get our perspective right. What is the source of our income? We have a tendency to believe it is our employer or our hard work or our ingenuity or our entrepreneurship. That's what has gotten us our stuff. But Deuteronomy 8 and verse 18 says that it's only from God that we even have the ability to gain wealth. So yeah, you worked hard. That's great. You should. Hard work is a godly virtue. But how are you able to physically work hard? Yeah, you made some good choices. That's good. I mean, you should use that noggin, right? But where did that noggin come from? I mean, there's no way you can get away from everything we have has come from him. He is the source of our blessings. And then in return, we have to decide, will we use those to honor him?
Well, yeah, and recognizing the if you will, the recipe for this, like, you know, when you're talking about what we tend to do is we tend to pursue the thing that we think gets us the reward, right? And so the most surface conclusion to draw is my job is what brought my happiness or my contentment or my status or whatever. When, as you said, if it wasn't for my ability to breathe, to move, to think, to act, to make judgments, then I wouldn't be able to keep a job. I wouldn't have a job. And you and I both know people who are unable to have a job for physical or mental reasons, right? So then what is there beyond that? And ultimately you get to God, but that challenge is so endemic to us. It's it's why we have recorded in Matthew that you're going to have to pick. You can't serve two masters, right? You're either going to serve God or you're going to serve money. But to serve God doesn't mean that you're not going to have money.
Right.
It just means if I pursue God first, the money that I acquire, the possessions that I acquire, will be through that avenue. That this is a blessing from God to be used for His glory and not my own.
Yeah, totally agree. And you mentioned Matthew, where Jesus says you can't serve God and money.
Yeah.
I find it interesting that he chose as the chief rival of God, he chose money. And it's just a universal trait, and it has been for a long time. We like money, and there's nothing inherently wrong with money. The love of money is the root of all evil. But I think also, even one step more mature is that not only do I want to honor God with my possessions, that overriding principle will also govern how I manage my money and how I spend my money, and perhaps even what I would do to earn money, so that I can honor God with what I have and do even more good and more things that will advance His priorities. You see, that's a different level of maturity.
Yeah, it certainly is. And you think about, you mentioned First Timothy 6, right? That the love of God is the root of many kinds of evil. And just before that, we read that godliness with contentment is great gain. So if I put whatever resources God has blessed me with under the umbrella of godliness, right? So these things are meant to be used in a framework of me serving God, me being what God wants me to be. Then I'm going to place those resources on a track that's going to have eternal um, reward, not only for me, but for those that that I can help to serve God because of it.
Right. And in that verse, by the way, I think if you're looking for a single text that strikes on the most in the most succinct way, but on the fundamentals of money, it's probably First Timothy 6, starting at verse 6 and going down. But he gives us another reason in there to choose to honor God with our possessions, and that is the fact that we won't take it with us. And what you have is earthbound. It really, if it even makes it to the end of your life, and a lot of the stuff we blow our money on won't make it to the end of our life. Some of it won't even make it to the end of the day. But he's saying that whatever it does, whatever you have accumulated, you're still going to leave it here. So, why not honor God with it while you can and while you have it and while it's under your control? You remember Solomon in Ecclesiastes was frustrated. He's like, I've acquired all of this, but I'm going to leave it to somebody, and what are they going to do with it? Well, God says, well, I got an answer for you. In fact, Proverbs 3:9 really is the answer.
Well, yeah, right. And Solomon's frustration is, I'm going to leave it to some knucklehead who's just going to squander it, right? I'm going to build all this up only to have some fool come along and tear it down and let it go to waste and let it get corrupted, which is why, if we, talking about perspective, right? If we keep that reality in mind, an interesting dynamic that we all experience, even if we don't have the wisdom of Solomon, is when you buy a car, right? When you first buy a car, you wash it 6 times a week. You don't want anybody to touch it. Some people I've seen, after they buy the car, the little mats that that they use to keep people's feet from
Yeah, the little
dirtying
white ones. Yeah.
Yeah, right. I've seen people that'll keep that in there for a while. They don't want to touch it. Kids, you don't get to eat in it or whatever. But that same vehicle 15 years down the road is going to be considered a junker, and there's milkshake stains, and this breaks and that breaks and this isn't working, and you never wash it and you don't care because it's a just a thing, right? It's just a thing. And too often I think we put so much emphasis and so much of our, and we'll probably come back to this later, but so much of our emotion into those things when those things are certainly not going to follow us out of this life.
Yeah, for sure. And, but we forget that, don't we? Again, we come by selfishness pretty honestly. And, one of the things we have to understand, well, one of the things we have to sort through, I think, in our own mind is, why do I have what I have? I don't know that many people have actually taken the time to sort through that, but that's a profound question. Now obviously we have in different levels and different amounts, and even at different stages in life, we have more or less, and we've had all of us have had our ups and downs. We've had times when like everything was kind of going well, and then other times where it wasn't. Sometimes you're driving down the road, you're hitting all the green lights, and then the next day it's all the red lights. Our finances kind of can be that way, but no matter where we are on that spectrum, we have. Okay, and the question is why? Why have I been blessed? So why do I have the house, the car, the bank account, the whatever? Why do I have this? And I really think there's only two possible explanations. So that's a foregone conclusion, right? I think we all agree with that. And we could also probably all say we have been blessed with more than most. Okay, I think we can all agree with that. Why? And there's only two explanations. Number one, one possible explanation is so that I can consume those things on myself. And that comes pretty naturally, doesn't it? And it feels pretty good sometimes. The second option of why I have is to advance God's priorities. And I honestly can't think of a third option. And if we're looking at that honestly, Proverbs 3:9 comes into play here, doesn't it? Honor yourself with all your possessions, right? That's what the world says. The world says, hey, you deserve it. Like, you need to go ahead and get that loan. You need to have this ride. You need to do this thing. You need to take this trip because you work hard, and hey, you only go around once, and you deserve that. That's what the world says. But boy, the world usually has the wrong answer, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah, correct.
And Solomon is saying, look, I've had a lot, and I've had to sort through a lot of details. Read Ecclesiastes. He had to sort through a lot of the things that come along with wealth. And he ends up saying, honor the Lord with your possessions. And so once we choose to do that, that really does change everything. It changes how I view money. It changes how I manage money. It even affects my spending decisions as well.
So, over all your time doing these money management seminars from a biblical perspective, what are some common obstacles, hang-ups that people have, especially when it comes to how they actually take some of these conceptual things and put them into practice?
Well, I think the first hang-up is they never get the grasp on the purpose in the first place. I think, and I think it's common. It's not a knock on anybody, but most people think that we get stuff so that we can get ourselves stuff. Obviously, we have to have money to buy groceries, and we have to eat, and we have to live indoors. Okay, those are two big priorities. And Paul told Timothy, tell all the people you're preaching to, if you have those two things, be content. But beyond that, and we all have much beyond that, now what? And I don't think the average person really thinks past up to the point of why. I know I have, but why do I have? And I think that's the first problem. Beyond that is just having a plan at all, or even having it as a goal that I'm going to let my perspective on the source of my money, that being God, have a rule, a reign over how I choose to use it.
Yeah. The um, yeah, allowing God to reign in your life and allow that to be seen in our money. You think about the rich young ruler, you know, what do I need to do to inherit eternal life?
I'll do
Well,
anything.
that's it, right? Okay, well, the commands. Oh yeah, I've done all those. There's one thing that you lack. Take all you have, sell it, give it to the poor. Whoa! But isn't that so true for many of us today?
Yeah.
You know, it it's like, okay, like you said, I'll sing praises. Oh, there's a work day at the church, or there's this or there's that. I'll do all sorts of things, but actually sacrifice financially for the work of God, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and what we have a lot of times, we have folks on two extremes. The one you just described, they'll let God reign in every aspect of their life except their finances. And then there's others who will, once they've given something on Sunday, I'm done.
Oh,
You know, and Jesus in Matthew 25, he talked about those who would pay their tithes of mint and cumin and anise. I mean, can you imagine paying 10% of the herbs and spices you got from your garden? That's pretty detailed. But you also leave out judgment, mercy, and faith. And he said you should have done both. So we'd like to put it in one or the other. I'll really serve God and I'll slip a 20 in the plate, or I'm going to give a big check and leave me alone until next Sunday. And see, that's neither of those folks have completely gotten it yet. And it really is a maturing process.
Yeah, it's sort of like the dad who is unemployed but cuddles with the kids, and the other dad that pays child support, but that's it, you know.
Yeah, we have a tendency as humans to go to extremes. And, but it is amazing though how folks view money when it comes to out to eat or a vacation or a car payment versus what it looks like when that collection plate comes by. And it is, there have been times I have been privy to information about who gave what, and I know what they do for a living. And I know, I have some idea what the income is. I know where they go for vacations and how often they eat out on the weekends. And I'm thinking, that's what you gave? Really? But see, we forget, is it to consume on myself or is it to advance his priorities? And that really does become the key question we have to deal with and answer.
Yeah, and let's just stay on that for just a quick second, because I think that's a super practical way to help people to, if somebody's listening to this and they're like, yeah, you know what, I do need to be better about honoring God with my wealth, honoring God with my possessions, but how do I figure that out? And I think you just nailed one of the key ways to start looking at that. So for me, if we go to any sort of sit down restaurant, there's, my wife and two kids, but they eat like adults. It still amazes me that just a regular restaurant, we're not talking about anything fancy, we're talking IHOP or something, right? Um, when I'm paying after a tip, there may be a 6 or a 7 as the first number in that bill. It's like,
for a single meal.
one meal.
A single meal.
It's nuts. It's nuts. But I love the fact that you highlight that, because let's say I'm not me. Let's say, but I'm another family. It's a Christian family, and I'm gonna do that for lunch at IHOP or dinner at IHOP. But then the very next day, the thought of even that amount, which you and I could talk about that, but even that amount, it seems like, oh no, I
Yeah, I know.
Right? Yeah.
And again, and so the converse to that is, and I know people like this. In my work with Bear Valley, I get to know some really some people who have it straight, who've got their priorities straight. There will be also those who will say, we're not going to go to IHOP. We're gonna throw a roast in the crock pot, and for $10 worth of groceries, we're going to feed the entire family and have some leftovers, so that we can continue to give $50 a week for this particular good work, in addition to what we give to the church. There are people like that. Let me tell you something, and this is where I get so excited when yes, there are people that don't have their priorities right, don't have the perspective right, but there are those who do. And there's a whole nother level of maturity when you can even begin to think, not only can I honor God with my possessions, but how can I increase my possessions so I can honor him even more with them? I want to tell you a story, true story. Obviously, there ain't gonna be no names or even places, but a couple had a rental property, and over the years managed that rental property, and as the purpose of having rental property is, the tenants ended up, paying off the house. So they owned it. Which is a wise way to do it. I mean, you can use wisdom in managing money. It's amazing. That's a whole different topic, but they used this, and when it was paid off, they decided they wanted to honor God with it. And so they deeded that to Bear Valley to be used in training preachers. And I'm the director of international studies, and they wanted to be used in the international schools. We took the proceeds of that, put it in a income producing vehicle, a safe one though, where it's averaging 5-6%, no risk. And from the proceeds of that, we are funding 3 different preacher training schools with a total enrollment of between 80 and 90 students for a decade. Now, think about that. The current enrollment is around 80 or 90, but awesome. During that decade, there's going to be many, many more. I mean, I think I can safely say probably 200 are going to go through these 3 preacher training schools in the next decade, all funded by the proceeds of this rental property that tenants paid for.
Awesome.
So they could have sold that and gone on a big trip and done, they could have even done a lot of good with it and done a lot of other stuff too. They wanted to honor God with their possessions. And I tell you, if you call them right now and ask, do you regret that? Not a chance. Not a chance. They only wish they could do more. So you see, that's a whole different level of spiritual maturity when I can say, not only do I want to honor God with my possessions, I'm going to actually manage them in a way I can do more honoring God with those same possessions. Yeah,
because there's so many ways, like you mentioned, $160,000 in a home. But if 100 people cut their cable bill, and use that, just the difference from a cable bill that's just outrageous to something that allows you to still watch TV or whatever you do, but is a little, and then with the intent to use that to honor God with, just what amazing impact that would have. And so, yeah, what a great example.
But again, it begins with that perspective. So even my budget, even my spending plan, my spending habits, all of these are governed by the fact that he's the source and he is the one to be honored with them.
Yeah. So to pull some of this together, I think, from listening to you, it really starts with, what's the frame of mind that I walk around with for the impact of my life today and the way that I'm to use the resources that I'm blessed with today. And I suspect you would agree, right? That it's to honor God now so that we can all honor God eternally when this life is over. And if we really begin to take an eternal perspective over our time now, we can, in most cases, it will make it much easier to make those kind of short-term decisions with our money that's going to have an eternal impact.
Yeah. Absolutely. And again, it's counterintuitive, but selfishness is ultimately not gratifying. And we've all done it. You know, we've all had that, like that thing where, and now I think maybe it happens more with online. You know, like we see this thing online. That, by the way, that's a lot of impulse purchases. Impulse purchasing was a bad problem when we couldn't shop online, and now that we're like literally a click away. And so we order that thing because it's just going to make us happy, and we anticipate it's coming. And when it arrives, we quickly realize the anticipation of it coming was actually more gratifying than its arrival, because that's not exactly what I thought it was going to be. And selfishness isn't gratifying. But when you can lay down at night and know that you are helping to train 200 preachers for the next decade, if your priorities are right and your heart's right, there's no RV, there's no new golf club that's going to ever take the place of that. You know, by the way, every time I bought a new driver thinking I can at least get some more distance, guess what? Apparently, I'm still a bad golfer. You know, I might as well just keep the driver I have. It doesn't make any difference.
Well, yeah, and even if you were a better golfer, it's still just about you. And so when Jesus says that it's better to give than to receive, he meant it, and there's real wisdom in that. And
Yeah.
our constant pursuits to give to ourselves in a way that matches what it feels like to give to others, is just never going to satisfy. Never going to satisfy.
Yeah, and we'll be blessed. You know, didn't Jesus say, "Give, and it'll be given back," but not tit for tat, not even. It'll be, when it comes back to you, it'll be pressed down, shaken together, running into your lap. You can't outgive God.
Amen.
But here's the deal. So God gives us possessions. He gives us resources. He gives us money. My belief is he does that to test our loyalty. And my rationale is because of this. He gives, and then he wants us to give back, but he doesn't need anything we have. I mean, he gave it to us in the first place. He can make anything else he wants. He doesn't need, he's not physical. He doesn't need those things. So why does he give to me and then want me to honor him with those same possessions? And the only explanation I can come up with is he's testing my loyalty, because he knows that where your money is, there is your heart. Our money and our heart are inseparably tied together. You put one in one place and the other one follows along, which tells me that if I want to if I want to have a more spiritual heart, I need to start making spiritual decisions with my money. Go ahead and put the money in a spiritual place, and I guarantee you your heart will follow along. And so ultimately, that's what's happening. See, our loyalties and our true commitment is being tested most often, perhaps, with our resources.
Oh, yeah. And that's why if we're willing to honestly look ourselves in the mirror and just ask this question, where are my treasures? Like, let me look around and let me see where my treasures are, and then I'll know my heart's right there with them. And if I don't like that conclusion that I have to draw, then I need to start putting my treasures somewhere else, right?
Exactly.
So I'm gonna. I've heard you talk about a story with a dad and a son and some fries.
Oh, yeah.
Can you share that?
Yeah. I don't remember exactly everything that happened, but so this was a senator, Bob McCoon, I think was his name, told the story. He told this story, went to a fast food restaurant with his kids, and had burgers and fries on the tray on the table, and at some point while they're eating, he reached to take one of his son's French fries. His son, who was a little boy at the time, grabbed his hand and said, "Don't touch my fries." And I think it was a congressman. The congressman was shocked by that, and from that, he in retrospect, he wrote down several conclusions. One was, the boy doesn't understand that I'm the source of his fries. Also, he doesn't understand I don't need his fries. He doesn't realize I can go get more fries. He doesn't realize if I wanted to, I could cover him in fries. He said, but what hurt the most was he was not willing to share with me what I had given to him. And wow, I mean, I think all of us can relate to that on that level. And if we can relate on that level, how much more do you think it hurts God to have blessed us so richly? But when it comes time to honor him, to support his priorities, to advance his purposes, don't touch my fries. You know, I worked hard, got an education, and you only go around once. And, you know, that's got to hurt. And so we've got to get this heart right and get the right perspective and let Proverbs 3:9 rule our finances, that we're going to honor God, even with our possessions.
That's right. We got to trust, because so often people are fearful. If I give more of my resources to God, then I'm going to end up without. And in that loving relationship, like you said in that story, God can cover us in fries, right?
He
So
has.
so don't worry about that. We
Yeah.
just need to.
Well, in fear, we say, God bless me and I'll trust you. And God says, no, trust me and I'll bless you.
Amen.
And there's a big difference.
That's right. And the history of mankind's relationship with God is that God is indeed trustworthy, right?
Absolutely.
And
We believe, every one of us believes that widow who gave those 2 mites, who went home with nothing. I have yet to believe that anybody believes that she just died of starvation, just went back home, no money, crawled up in a corner and died. Nobody believes that.
correct.
And I ask, why don't you think that? Well, because God takes care of. Oh, wait a minute. Is that right? So you mean he'll take care of her, but you, on the other hand, you've got to be really careful. And, you know, come on. It really does come down to faith, priorities, and perspective.
Yeah, we can do lots of financially risky things, but honoring God with our possessions is never financially risky.
Yeah, it's always a good move.
It is. It is. Well, thank you so much, Keith. Really appreciate it.
Well, I've enjoyed our conversation. Always
Yeah.
do.
Yeah. Well, hopefully this conversation will be a blessing to others.
Hope
All right.
so.
Yeah. You
You have a
take
great
care.
day. Have a great week.
Will do. See ya.
Take care.